Good day, everyone. Richard Cowperthwait for Northwest Access TV. Thanks for joining us. We have call you a special guest. It's been a long time since I've seen our guest here, Catherine Dimitruk, the longtime executive director of the Northwest Regional Planning Commission. Great to see you. It's been a while, but thanks for coming on. I'm sure you'll have a lot to tell us about the commission. Well, I've been up here forever, Catherine, and a big early source for me for my regular full-time long ago reporting days is Russell Green, who I think was maybe the second exec director after Oscar Becker. Have I got the right name?
Oscar Baker.
Sorry, I knew I was a little off. Oscar Baker was the first exec director. So we're going back. Regional Planning Commission here and maybe elsewhere started like 1970 or so, or?
Yeah, actually it's about 50 years ago we started, and we started originally as a combined Regional Planning Commission and Regional Development Corporation. So people may be familiar with Franklin County Industrial Development.
Yeah.
Originally we were one organization, and then in the 1970s the two organizations split, and that happened across the state. And then we grabbed Grand Isle County too and combined the two together. So it's been a long time, but went through some iterations at the beginning, but we've been Northwest Regional Planning Commission for about 45 years. Yeah,
so thank you. So Oscar Baker and Russell Green, the first two. And when I punched you guys up today to read about you, it took me a second in my old age, I guess, when I saw the reference to representing 23 municipalities, including 3 incorporated villages. Took me, no offense to the good folks in Alburg, but I guess Alburg in addition to Swanton Village and Enosburg Falls.
Correct.
So you represent, basically everybody in Franklin and Grand Isle counties.
Yes, we do. We primarily are representatives of the municipalities in Franklin and Grand Isle counties, and we're governed by a board of commissioners, and each community gets to appoint 2 people to that board.
Yeah, and I've certainly dealt with a lot of those folks over the years. Does a municipality ever tell you or the other regional planning commissions, thanks but no thanks, we don't want to? Do they have to deal with you or have to be a member, or can they opt out if for some reason they want?
Well, all municipalities by state statute are a member of a regional planning commission. We are considered a political subdivision of the state, so we're kind of quasi county level government, but not county government. So all municipalities by law are a member of the Regional Planning Commission, but nothing requires a municipality to participate. So nothing requires a municipality to appoint 2 members to serve on the board or to use any of our programs or services.
And of your 23 municipal members, whatever, does some not send you, does some not have 2 representatives?
We do have a few communities that are lacking some representatives on the board, and we're always looking and trying to get new members for the board. So you can find that on our website if your municipality has some vacancies.
And that's a range. Sometimes they're going to be a city council member from St. Albans City, selectmen, or just regular folks, whatever. That can be a range of people, obviously.
It is a mix. It tends to be folks who either are currently or formerly a member of local government in some way, either on the planning commission or the select board, or volunteer in some capacity. But it doesn't have to be. It can simply be a person who's interested in the types of projects we work on.
That's right. And monthly meetings?
Yes, the board does meet monthly, and they really set the overall policy and direction for the commission and adopt our budgets.
Getting a little ahead of myself. You've been executive director for how long?
I have been executive director for a little under 30 years. I've been at the Regional Planning Commission for 30 years.
Well, that's impressive. I thought I logged about 20 times as the one-person news department when I think St. Albans had, a fairly decent radio station. I thought 20 years was a long time, but I thought you were, way ahead of that, so about 30 years.
I never expected to be here this long, but, it's a fantastic place to be.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Give us a little background on yourself. I'm sure some folks out there know you, others certainly don't, probably.
Sure. So I grew up in South Reigate, Vermont, my sister and I and my mom, and went to school at Northeastern for a really short time, and then decided Vermont was where I needed to be. Came back and graduated from the University of Vermont, and then graduated in the middle of a recession, so that was super fun. And after a series of, part-time jobs, I ended up working for Northwest Regional Planning Commission, and I've been here ever since. I currently live in Fairfax.
Or so Franklin County person, interesting. Who was executive director when you started working for the commission?
Sharon Murray
Sure.
was the
Okay, I
executive
remember,
director.
remember Sharon.
So I think I'm the 4th executive director.
Really? So, boy, so just 4 in about 50 years. So
Yeah.
Sharon succeeded Russell Green then?
Yeah,
Wow. That's impressive stability.
it really is, yeah. And
You've got to be the longest-serving exec director of a regional planning commission in the state, I would assume, or not?
you know, I just realized that was the case last week.
Really?
So yes,
Wow.
barely. There is another director who's been director almost as long as me.
Wow. And just checking your staff, I interviewed a while back Marlena Valenta, who's great kid, know her parents well. And Kathy Lavoie was the other name I mentioned off here, a name I obviously recognize. And you said Kathy had jumped in for maybe a couple of years, but didn't want to let her go, I guess. So.
Yeah, well, if anybody knows Kathy, you'd know we wouldn't want to let her go either. So yeah, she started with us as a temporary 2-year pandemic-funded economic recovery person, and we've just been able to keep her on ever since.
Wow. So it sounds like obviously organizations evolve. I'm just struck by the growth and the staff. Back in the days when I was dealing with Russell Green, I'm wondering, I assume there was probably like a secretary or something. I'm not sure there was even anybody else, but I don't. I'm going back a lot of years.
Yeah.
But tremendous growth.
Right. Yeah, when I started at the Regional Planning Commission, there were 4 of us.
Wow.
And now, we range anywhere from 15 to 17 people.
And are those all full-time positions?
All but a couple are full-time
Really? Mostly
positions.
full-time? Wow.
Yeah, and we are blessed with a really amazing staff. I mean, I've been there 30 years, but we also have 5 staff members who've been there more than 20 years.
Really?
And so we've got a lot of great longevity, a lot of amazing knowledge and skills.
Boy, nothing like institutional knowledge. It's, no, that's amazing to hear that.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is we have the same positions, but we don't really do the same jobs. So the job changes all of the time. There's new areas that are of need to our municipalities. There's new challenges facing the state. There's new opportunities to do great things for the region. So there's always something new and interesting that comes around.
Yeah, and again, I see 11 regional planning commissions in the state, covering obviously all of the state.
Correct, there are 11.
Interesting. You get together with the other executive directors once in a while, I assume?
We do. The executive directors actually meet monthly, and we coordinate on a host of programs and services to make sure that there's some consistency statewide in the way that we approach the work that we do.
Yeah. Funding comes to mind. That's a big staff. Is funding always a struggle or not so much? But talk about funding here. We're talking some serious bucks here.
Yeah, we are. So our funding is really a mix. So we have several sources of funds that we can count on annually as kind of a foundational budget.
Yeah.
So all of the municipalities in the region contribute per capita contribution to the Regional Planning Commission.
And they have to do they have to do that.
They don't have to do
They
that.
don't have
That's
to do that?
actually a voluntary
Oh, really?
thing. But we found that all of the municipalities do, and I think most think it's quite a bargain for
Yeah.
the services that they get.
How much of your budget does that cover?
That's about just under $70,000 of
Yeah.
our overall budget, which is around $3 million. So,
Wow.
it's a really small percentage of
Yeah.
our budget, but I would say it's exceedingly valuable because there's no strings attached. We can
Yeah.
use that to leverage other funds. Additionally, we get regional planning funds from the state, and that's a share of the property transfer taxes that people pay when a property is sold. And then we get some foundational funding from the Agency of Transportation to do transportation planning.
Wow.
And so those are really our foundational funding sources. And then we seek grants from other sources, and we've been quite successful.
Interesting. I assume you've got at least one staff member or more who really focuses on getting grants, maybe
Really,
more,
all
maybe
of them
everybody?
do. Yeah, all of them do.
Really?
Yeah. And then the other thing that we've done in the past 3 years is we expanded in our water quality services, and we serve as what's called the clean water service provider for the Missisquoi and the Lamoille basins for the state.
Really?
And that's 2 members of our staff really focus on that program. It's a bit of a devolution where the state used to fund phosphorus reduction grants directly from the state to fund projects in those 2 basins in the Lake Champlain Basin. And now we get the funds, and we work with a volunteer Basin Water Quality Council who helps us give those grants.
Wow.
So that's quite a bit of work.
And that sounds like a huge issue, especially
It's-
with the flooding. Fortunately, Franklin, Grand Isle County's not much, but boy,
The
just
wood
see.
here.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, we have been so fortunate to be spared the
Yeah.
last 2 seasons of flooding. Very, very fortunate.
I guess I should know. You said you were Fairfax. Right? Fairfax has taken maybe the one place in the county that has taken a bit of a hit from the Lamoille flooding.
Yes, they are one of the communities that did take some of a flooding hit, but even with that, it's still significantly less than other communities in the
Yeah.
Lamoille Basin.
Thinking of Fairfax, I didn't eat there much, but I liked the place. Seemed like a pretty decent place, but you lost Erica's a
We
while ago.
did lose Erica's, yeah.
All I know about the restaurant business is what an incredibly tough business it is. That's all I know about it. But
Yeah, I understand they own several other places in the
yeah,
area
they have
where
the
you can
damn,
still
damn
get,
store in Milton. Yeah,
still
I know
get
one
some
of
of
their
the
other
great stuff.
places. So
Yeah.
I'm sure they keep busy, but yeah, kind of a loss. That's just Swanton. I haven't been to Swanton. Was looking at trying to get a restaurant for years, and I guess Green Mountain Bistro I guess is off to a decent start.
That's
but
great, good to hear.
Anyway. Boy, so it sounds like just a lot of growth. Going back to your first years as executive director, so you just sounds like you're doing a lot more now than you were doing then. Does things get overwhelmed? You get overwhelmed at all? It sounds like you have a great staff, but it sounds like you have a lot of things to deal with.
Yeah, there's a lot that we need to know about.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of different areas that we work in. Definitely get overwhelmed. I think everybody gets overwhelmed
Yeah,
in their
I
jobs from
certainly
time
do.
to time. It's
Yeah.
not, I don't think that makes us anything special, but
Yeah.
what I think the vast array of things that we work on gives us a couple of benefits. One is it keeps the job interesting. So that's fabulous. But the other thing that it does is it really allows us to see connections between things. So, if we have a person who's working with a town on a culvert replacement project because it has a hazard mitigation focus,
Yeah.
the culvert's too small, it needs to be replaced with a bigger one to help mitigate floods. Well, we also think, well, are there any water quality things that could be added to this project to help improve the water quality? So we're able to really make these connections between projects and across programs, which is really fun.
That's right. So if a municipality has, say, a culvert project, I mean, typically will they, or a wide range of projects, maybe will they typically, check in with you folks to see if there's some help you can give them?
Yeah, often they will. It
yeah.
depends upon the municipality and the size and the scale of
Yeah.
the project, but we often serve as a project manager for those larger projects that are
Right.
funded through the state to the towns. We can serve as a project manager.
Huh.
And, as you know, many of our municipalities do not have a large staff on hand. And it's hard you can't have expertise in everything at the local level. And
Yeah.
so they're able to use our staff to serve as project managers, to hire the consultants, hire the contractors, make sure everything's done according to the requirements of the grant.
Yeah, and I know there was a concern with ARPA money in particular, but I know I think state was sending out folks to some of the smaller towns to help with, maybe was it American Rescue Plan Act money in particular? And I'm sure you're on top of everything. I'm hearing, just having talked to Swanton Town folks the other day, ARPA money, it sounds like there's been some changes there. ARPA, I'm hearing special funds. Was it is that something you can explain a little bit?
I can touch on it briefly. So all of the municipalities got a special
Yeah.
allotment of funding
Yeah.
through ARPA. And originally, it was very specific in terms of the things you had to use the funding for.
Yeah.
But the rules changed over time so that all municipalities were eligible for what's called revenue replacement. So essentially, they were able to transfer the funds to a bit more of a general fund purpose.
So basically
A lot more
transferring.
flexibility.
That's right. A later wasn't a deadline for ARPA not in the not too distant future? Was that deadline? Is that deadline now gone? Can they?
Well, if the municipality chose to consider it revenue replacement, then
Yeah.
you've already spent the funds according to the federal government,
Really?
and so you're all set.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah, and so I think that, and in the end, I think that was actually a really great change because it enables the municipalities to really think about, what can we do transformationally with these funds without having to worry about, does it check the 20 boxes it needs to at
Yeah.
at the federal level.
We're in St. Albans Town, of course, right here. Just as an example, what are you doing with St. Albans Town these days? I mean, pretty busy place. You've got a number of things going on.
Yeah. First of all, we always use their the new town office for meetings because it's fabulous.
Oh, is that right?
So that's great. It's a great space. But one of the exciting projects we're working on with St. Albans Town is called a transit-oriented development project. So we are working with Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, who got a really big federal grant to do transit-oriented development planning in communities along the railroad. And so St. Albans Town was interested in participating in this project, and we're working with them on it. And what it's doing essentially is looking at the Exit 20 area where we are and seeing what can we do to foster higher density, mixed use development. And that's really what transit-oriented development is. It's development that's mixed use, so commercial, residential, retail, and a higher density, so that if you think about, a transit, a city bus, you need a lot of people who might be otherwise walking or needing to get around in order to make the bus feasible. And so transit-oriented development, the idea is to look at this Exit 20 area and see, are there ways that the town can foster that type of development? Are there changes that can be made to the regulations? Is there some master planning that can be done to really encourage this? And so we're pretty excited about this project. And the St. Albans Town, with the town manager and the town planner, have been really invested in the project. And so we're excited to see where it goes. I think there's a series of public meetings next week.
Really? And
so we hope people go, and they can find out more information on the town website.
Interesting. So nothing to report on that now, but you feel like that's got some pretty good potential.
I do. I think it has some great potential. I mean, if you look around the Exit 20 area, you can see there's some vacant land that could be developed or redeveloped. There's great access to the interstate already. There's a rail trail here. There's already a great mix of retail. And so think about how that could evolve and change.
That's right. And of course,
exciting.
the Swanton Town line comes in close, and I think St. Albans Town officials have talked some with Swanton Town officials about some possible development in that area.
Although I don't know much about those conversations, so I wouldn't want to jump in there.
But Swanton does come in very, very close.
It does
there.
come in very close. Yep.
Interesting.
Yep. So that's one great project we're excited about.
St. Albans City, while we're on St. Albans City, you're involved with a number of things with city folks also.
Yeah, so we do a lot of things with the city around brownfields redevelopment. So
There's been an issue with Cathedral Square going in. That was an issue on the old Fonda Solo site.
Right, and we did participate in that.
Wow.
So brownfields are either actually contaminated sites or sites that are conceived to be or believed to be contaminated. And because of that contamination, they can't be redeveloped for housing or commercial or whatnot. And we have funding through the Environmental Protection Agency that funnels through our office to actually pay for two things. One is the assessment of a property to do soil testing and soil borings and test to see what's actually on the site. And that's where we were involved with the former Fonda site, is in very early stages in the testing and really coming up with what's called a corrective action plan, which is how you either clean up the site or cap this contaminated soils and treat it in such a way that it's safe to be there. And then additionally, we have a revolving loan fund that helps pay for cleanup costs. So that's one of the ways.
How big an issue was the Fonda Solo site? Was that a pretty big issue to deal with that?
It was a big,
Really?
If you think about it, and for two reasons, it's a former manufacturing facility, and best practices in manufacturing have changed over time, but you're left with the legacy of things that were done in the past. And then it's adjacent to the railroad, so there's some legacy issues with that as well. It was an issue, but it was solvable. It was solvable with good planning and with funding.
Interesting. And St. Albans Town, their former public works site, they're still pondering what to do with that. I guess that's an issue. Are you dealing with that at all? I guess there's a potential, at least, brownfields issue there.
There's potentially, and I think that our brownfields person has been in coordination with the town, but I don't know the specific details about that one.
Back, you mentioned the transportation. Didn't Green Mountain Transit, which I've never personally dealt with, aren't they cutting back on some of their services?
Yeah, so I do serve on the Green Mountain Transit
really?
Board representing Franklin County.
Huh.
And yes, there are definitely some funding challenges. Green Mountain Transit is not unique. This is happening all across the country for transit
I mean,
agencies.
are there any transportation organizations that make money? Doesn't everybody pretty much lose money?
Every form of transportation is subsidized
Yeah.
by taxpayers.
I mean,
you
I
know.
still read Boston papers once I got the Globe online, but it just sounds like the subway
Mhm.
system has just been a horror show for, it just sounds like it's still just in terrible shape.
Yeah,
So anyway.
yeah, and so.
So were you, I guess, what, Green Mountain Transit just had a serious budget issue? They just had to
Yeah,
spend-
so what we're doing, as an organization is we're trying to get ahead of the budget issue.
Yeah.
So there is going to be, starting next year, a rapid decline in the funding that's available to Green Mountain Transit to continue to provide the services. So rather
Yeah.
than making, draconian cuts 2 years from now, we're trying to get ahead of the curve
Yeah.
and make a softer landing by doing some initial cuts now and then planning ahead for future cuts in services. Our goal is to try to adjust services as much as we can to lessen the impact on people, but the reality is if you cut a route, even if it only has 20 people that
Yeah.
ride it every day, those 20 people are going to be impacted. But we're kind of stuck with no other choices
Wow.
but to adjust services.
And what are some of the routes? I should know this, but I don't. Are folks in Richford? There's a route between like St. Albans and Richford, say, or?
There is a route between St. Albans and Richford, and what's interesting about Green Mountain Transit is that we have both an urban service and a rural service,
Huh.
and the St. Albans to Richford service, Alberg to Georgia commuter, those are part of the rural service. And right now, the rural service is doing okay financially.
Huh.
So there aren't any proposed cuts to the rural services at this time.
Which is to
So-
say, is that Franklin County in general? So Franklin County, no
So Frank-
cuts at this
Yeah,
point?
Franklin and Grand Isle counties, yes.
And Grand Isle.
It's really, the cuts are really proposed for the Chittenden County area.
Okay.
Yeah, at this time. Yeah, there might be some shifts in rural service, but it would be more in who provides the service rather than an actual change in the
Yeah.
service itself.
So ridership is, and you mentioned maybe a number there. I mean, some folks take advantage of this, but we're not talking real crowded buses or anything?
No,
or-
we're not talking really crowded buses, but I would say in Franklin County, the Alberg commuter and the Richford to St.
Yeah.
Albans commuter are really, they're well-performing routes. They're used. Their,
Huh.
cost per passenger is right in line with what you would expect for a well-functioning
Really?
system. So those and the city bus, the St. Albans commuter, the St. Albans City Loop, those are all performing well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And what are people paying? People are paying, what are they paying, say, if you're going from St. Albans to Richford, or?
The rural service across Vermont is fare-free.
Oh, is that right?
Mhm.
Fare-free?
Fare-free. Mhm.
Inter-
So
are
it's
you-
free.
Are you
Take the
pondering,
bus.
are you pondering having to charge for that and not
That
make
may
it-
change in the future. I
Yeah.
mean, I
But
think
the rural
that
service is free?
right now the rural service is free, and that
Wow.
was a statewide policy decision
Huh.
made by the Agency of Transportation and Legislature,
Interesting.
to fund those enough so that fares were not needed.
So presumably people who could use the service know about this service. Do you think is there enough publicity about this? I mean, I don't hear about it much, but nothing I have to deal with myself, so that
Right.
doesn't mean anything, but
Right, I think it's one of those services that you probably don't know about until
Yeah.
you need it.
Yeah, it sounds like you're
But
right.
I think we can always do more for
Yeah.
publicity, and
And again, is there a service from St. Albans to Burlington, I
there
assume?
is, yes, there's
Yeah.
a commuter route that goes from St. Albans to Burlington, and that's
Huh.
also a great resource.
Yeah.
I think it's, folks who I know have taken it have really enjoyed it, can sit
Yeah.
back and take advantage of the Wi-Fi and not worry about parking when you get to Burlington.
Interesting. Of course, with interviewed Tim Smith, the St. Albans mayor, and of course, executive director of Franklin County Industrial Development Corp., and just labor shortage sounds like an issue for just about everybody out there. But of course,
Yes.
and in fact, in the Vermont Business Magazine, you folks get some attention in there, as does Tim, but just talks about 10,000 people leaving Franklin County every day to
Mhm.
head to Chittenden County typically for jobs, and
Yeah,
and, hey, there's some good jobs up here. People, companies need more workers up here. If they could only convince some of those folks, hey, why don't you hang around here for good jobs and stuff.
Mhm.
So And
Yes.
I said you're having some success, and he said it's a little hard to measure that.
It is hard to measure, and it's,
Yeah.
and, it's hard to measure with so many professional jobs allowing telecommuting now,
Yeah.
so it's a little different.
Speaking of labor shortage, it sounds like you've got a very stable workforce, but do you ever run into a situation where you have a vacancy and hard to fill? Is that the last issue you have?
We just did.
Oh, is that
Yeah,
right?
we are not immune to
Really?
the workforce issues. We had a vacancy that we just filled, and we almost lost our employee because they could not find housing.
Oh,
They
boy,
were able.
Is that right? Another
Mhm.
huge issue.
Yeah, so we were able to.
Wow.
Fortunately, they were able to find housing,
Wow.
and they're starting the beginning of next month, so we're thrilled. But we almost lost an employee. And, when we do have vacancies, I do think to myself, should we really be advertising anywhere outside of Vermont or outside the local area, because will they be able to come here and find housing?
That's right.
Yeah.
And how do you typically advertise all over? I mean,
Yeah, we do. We advertise
Really?
in the local outlets as well as statewide outlets,
Wow.
and then we do some more national things. Mhm.
geez. And you're hearing about some, obviously, big employers like JPEAK, I think, providing some housing for some of their employees.
Mhm.
I guess, I guess they get the Martha's Vineyard paper where I have a friend, and I mean, a place like that, I mean, a huge issue with cost of living, just,
Mhm.
totally crazy.
Yeah.
And some employers just trying to get some housing that they're providing. So nothing that Regional Planning Commission, no, you're not providing housing for any of your employees.
We
I
are
assume.
not, but we've joked about it, but we haven't done it yet.
Yeah. In fact,
Yeah.
I asked Tim Smith just about Beta Technologies, maybe some of the biggest economic news around here in
Right.
years. But, and over time, sounds like a number of employees they'll be looking for. And I said, boy, can you even find them, hopefully, but
Mhm.
just housing, that sounds like I mean, that was on my list.
Housing.
Boy.
Yeah.
And you're dealing with housing issues, one of the
We
many
are.
things you're dealing with?
Yes, one of the many things we're dealing with.
Boy, have you got, in fact, Governor Scott was on WVMT this morning. I think he mentioned the figure, and you would be on top of this, but ideally the state could use, what I'm hearing, 30 to 40,000 housing units or something?
Right now.
I mean, right now.
Yes.
Boy, so how, I mean, have you got any hope of getting anywhere close to, pulling that off?
I always have hope. Otherwise, I couldn't do this job for 30 years.
Here we are.
But there are a number of things that I think are changing to help in this area.
And
So
you mentioned just by exit 20, maybe more dense.
maybe, yeah. I think there's a few things that are changing. One is that, the challenge with housing is now it's hitting everybody.
Yeah.
So even people who may have been like, no, we don't need any more housing, now, their friends or their children or their employees can't find housing. And so it's really, unfortunately, impacting everybody.
Yeah.
And so that is something that you need in order to really make change, is everybody needs to understand the problem and the issue.
Yeah.
And I think we're definitely there. There's been some changes at the state level to Act 250, which
gets talked about, which has been around about as long as regional planning commissions have been around.
which I'm pretty excited about to
Yeah.
see the impact that will make. Whether Act 250 is as much of a problem with housing development as a perceived problem
Yeah.
with housing development doesn't matter, because if you're
Yeah.
a developer and you're avoiding Act 250 because you perceive it to be
Yeah.
a problem, that's as important as if it is an actual.
That's a great point. That brings me back to my long ago full-time reporting days when Act 250 always had plenty of critics, especially from developers around here. And the Act 250 folks would say, Richard, you know what the success rate is if someone applies for a permit, 95% chance, but developers would say, and guess what? We're not going to even bother with the project because it's so
Right.
tough. So that's a great point.
Right, and those statistics remain true.
Yeah.
99% of projects get
99.
approved,
Yeah.
or even higher.
But how many
don't
even
apply?
Right.
And that's what you can't measure, and
Wow.
that is what I think, we'll see right now. There's some immediate exemptions to Act 250, so a quarter mile outside of our designated villages, if
Yeah.
a town has planning and zoning, is exempt from Act 250,
Wow.
up to 50 units of housing.
Wow.
And so that's pretty exciting to me to
That
see.
sounds like a significant change.
It's a significant
This is just from the last
change.
legislative
Last
session?
legislative session.
Because
Mhm.
Act 250 changes gets talked about every
It does, but
year.
it happened.
Interesting.
Yeah, and
And aren't
then,
duplexes, that wasn't that another legislative change?
Yeah,
I'm
2
not sure
years
that's Act
ago.
250, but,
it's not, but 2
Okay.
years ago, I think Vermont was among the leaders in the nation
Yeah.
by getting rid of single-family zoning.
Huh.
So right
Oh,
now,
really?
anywhere in the state where year-round housing is allowed,
Yeah.
you can build a duplex with the same standards as you would build a single-unit house.
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, St. Albans City certainly seems to be pretty active on the housing front. Of course, Cathedral Square is underway, and the big project down on Lake Street was at 72 units.
That's a lot of- yeah.
Grant Butterfield.
Mhm. Yeah, and a lot of those are available to folks who are less than the average
Yeah.
income, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
And also, the city has really taken leadership by purchasing properties and making them available for housing, and really done a lot in that area. And I think it's been great to have more available housing in the downtown and bring people here. And if you walk the sidewalks, you
Yeah.
can see a difference.
Yeah. And the
Yeah.
city also has plans, I'm not sure they're moving much right now, but right near City Hall, some big possibilities
Yeah.
for some more
Yeah, absolutely.
housing.
Yeah.
What Fairfax, for example, and again, you're always hearing about just affordable housing, lack thereof, and even that term kind of affordable housing, what's affordable? Fairfax, anything going on in Fairfax on the housing front?
I am not aware of any large housing projects
Yeah.
going in Fairfax at this moment,
Yeah.
but I know that the municipality is really working to make sure that the water and sewer is capable of handling housing, and
Yeah.
other infrastructure is in
Yeah.
place to support housing.
And what about elsewhere, Franklin and Glendale counties, much housing, initiatives going on, or not too much?
There's 2 projects that we're working on that I'll talk about.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of potential development that I've heard about in the works, but I don't
Of
feel
course,
like I
Highgate's
should.
hoping for a Cathedral Square project also.
Yeah, so Highgate is doing this amazing project where they are working on water and sewer in the village.
Village core area.
Yeah, the Village Core project, and as part of that, Cathedral Square will be coming in and potentially building some senior housing.
Yeah.
So that is really transformational for Highgate when you think about it.
Yeah.
We've been supportive of that project from the very beginning through brownfields assessment and through project
Yeah,
management.
There was a Brownsfields issue there also, right?
Yeah, and so we've been part of that project from the beginning, and it's really amazing to see a community the size of Highgate take on a project of that scale. That's so transformational. It's
Yeah,
really
I talked to
a
Sharon
compliment.
Brusquette periodically about that. One concern that came up a couple of interviews with her ago was that Highgate might have to throw out a bond issue as part of this, but when I last talked with her, she was still hoping that wouldn't happen. I haven't talked with her for a while. But no, to me, that sounds like a tremendous project for Highgate.
It really is, and it will make such a lasting difference, not only for, the potential Cathedral Square development,
Yeah.
but anything that wants to happen. The library wants to expand, or
Yeah.
if someone wants to add an accessory apartment onto
Yeah.
their house, having the infrastructure makes so much of a
Yeah, of
difference.
course, the rail trail goes right through there also,
Yeah.
the Mill Valley Rail. And you mentioned another housing project someplace?
Right, so we're doing 2 other projects I'll touch on. One is we're doing an accessory dwelling unit duplex pilot project. So we have funding through the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston to do a housing project called Working Communities Challenge. And as part of that Housing for All program, we are doing this accessory dwelling unit and duplex pilot where private property owners apply to us to get funding we hired a contractor who will go into your home and
Yeah.
say, okay, this is how you could do it. Here's your
And as in
approximate
to
cost.
create an apartment or two in
Yep,
somebody's
yep.
home?
It'll create an apartment or a duplex.
Oh.
And then that's one project, and we'll help them all through the process, through construction. And then the second project we're working on is in Grand Isle County with Cider, which is a local nonprofit
Yeah.
in Grand Isle County. And we're working with them on a housing rehab program where we're trying to get some additional grant funds to help support housing rehab, to take houses that maybe aren't in the best shape and make them in better shape for the folks who live there, or if they want to make it available to add an apartment or to sell it so that other people can take advantage of the home, or just make it more comfortable for the people who live there now.
Yeah.
So we're excited about that.
When I interviewed Marlena Valenta a while ago and refreshed my, and she was very, very good, and I forget she was with someone, but I remember Marlena. But that was just kind of improving houses' windows in particular, kind of a weatherization initiative.
So it's called Window Dressers. And we're
window
working,
dressers.
we're working on that again this fall with the St. Albans City Energy Committee. And Window Dressers is this amazing nonprofit located in New England that helps to pay for window inserts. So they're, weatherized window inserts that you put on, and they're like an old-fashioned storm window. And it's a really unique program because all of them are built through a volunteer build program. So in October, there'll be a week-long volunteer build, and everybody who took advantage of those inserts and are either buying them or getting them for free because of their income, come and help build, and it's a great program.
Interesting. And weatherization, I mean, you hear a lot about that. Of course, we could get into the clean heat standard. That sounds like that's
Let's not do that.
Came up on radio this morning. Sounds like a very, just in general, how do you fare with do you think the legislature treats regional planning commissions okay? Do you log some time in Montpelier?
I do log some time in Montpelier, yes. I logged quite a bit of time with the Act 250 bill that was passed this past session.
And you're happy with the changes in Act 250, you think? I'm sure you didn't probably get all you wanted,
Of
but
course
you got,
not.
but you got
It's not the
something.
bill I would have written if I was in charge, but I think, given the competing interests and the remarkable coalition that held together where you have, the Vermont Chamber of Commerce and Vermont Natural Resources Council,
Really?
like coming to agreement, this was an amazing coalition process. So given all of the competing interests, I'm happy with how it turned out.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think that we will have an opportunity to see how it evolves and potentially do even more in the future. One of the long-term things I wanted to touch on about that bill, so I'm glad we circled back to it, is that in addition to these interim changes where Act 250 right now is exempt in certain areas of our state, now the regional plans that we do, so regional planning commissions all do a regional comprehensive plan that looks at, a host of different things within the region, from transportation to, water quality to conservation.
And for your whole service, for the whole service area.
We do it for all Franklin and Grand Isle counties, and all the other regional planning commissions do as well. One of the things we do as part of those plans is called a future land use plan. So we look at, all the areas in the region and in collaboration with our communities, say, here's where the most high-intensity growth should go. Here's the areas that, conservation should be the highest focus. Here's the areas where agriculture should be the highest focus. And so we do that in collaboration with our communities. And once we do these plans, not much really happened next. They're a great aspirational document. They did come into play in, grant applications and in some Act 250s applications. But now what's going to happen is, in collaboration with our municipalities, in these future land use plans, we're going to be designating the downtown and village centers, which are eligible for state incentives for tax credits and other grants.
St. Albans Town, for example, St. Albans Bay is there.
St. Albans Bay is there, St. Albans City Downtown, Swanton Village has one. All of our communities have their village designation area. We're going to be showing those in our regional plan now. So instead of each municipality having to do their own application and keep track of all that, we're just going to show it in the regional plan, and that's going to be the designation process. Additionally, we're going to be, in addition to showing the centers, we're going to be showing what's called planned growth areas or planned growth village areas. Combined, those two areas will have long-term exemptions from Act 250.
Oh, really?
Right. So once our regional plans are done and they're approved by a new state board, those areas, those planned growth areas that we show in the regional plan, will have exemption from Act 250.
Interesting.
And so that's pretty cool to actually say, like, okay, we're going to do planning, our municipalities are going to do planning, we're going to do planning in collaboration with our municipalities, and it's going to mean something. Like, the state is going to say, okay, our state permitting program is actually going to pay attention to that.
So is that something, regional planning, the regional plan, that's something you're working on as we speak?
Right, yeah, so it is. So through the end of the calendar year, the regional planning commissions are working collaboratively to come up with the standards for how we'll map these areas. And then starting in 2025, we're going to start that process in our region.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Municipality, they all have to have local plan? I mean,
They don't.
They don't?
No.
Nobody has to have
Nobody has to have a plan.
Really? But a lot of the 23 member, how many have local town plans or whatever?
Our last one that didn't, Isle Lamont, is in process now of finishing, so all of them. Yeah,
so
it's great.
all of them?
Yeah.
But they don't have to. And for that matter, are some of your 23, do they not have zoning?
Correct.
Is that some don't have zoning?
Correct, Isle Lamont and Alberg.
Is that right?
Yeah,
No.
Alberg, they have floodplain zoning, but that's it.
Interesting.
Yeah, but all of the others do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, you're involved with the community's doing their own town plan, you're invariably involved in helping them with that?
Yeah, we do. We help most of our towns, when they do a town plan update, work with us, and we provide the technical assistance. We help them get grants to pay the cost of doing the town plan update. And there's a lot of really dedicated local volunteers who work on these projects. But, a volunteer it's unfair to ask a volunteer to actually do all the busy work. So we do a lot of that, and we bring the technical and professional expertise in planning to the project, so it's great.
And how important are those town plans? I guess you would say very, very, very important. Are they followed much? I mean, it just sounds like a lot of work done. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people in town have probably no clue what's going on, but
I would say that the importance of a town plan varies depending upon what you're thinking about. So I think that the process of doing a town plan has value. When a community can come together and talk about what are our priorities, what do we see as the future of our community, and they do that every 8 years because that's what's required of state statute. That process in and of itself has value, and to help build community. And then from there, usually, even if no one ever opens the plan again, those priorities are remembered and those projects are carried forward. So there's value in that. And then the plans do serve as the basis for zoning when a town does decide to do zoning. Those towns that have zoning, the plan serves as a basis for that. And that's a really important foundation to work on.
So again, Alberg and Isle Lamont, no zoning, just enough people who just don't want to deal with zoning.
Yeah.
Has that been from your point of view, any crazy developments because of lack of zoning? Has that been, from your point of view, a big issue or not particularly?
Not that have been brought to my attention.
Yeah. Maybe you don't want it to be brought to your attention, but back to transit. I'm a railroad guy. I would love to in my lifetime. I'm not sure I'm going to make it. Maybe it'll never happen. But the Amtrak Vermonter, which I jump on to go to D.C. once in a while. You involved at all, perchance, in trying to get that train back to Montreal, or is that? I realize you have a few other things you're dealing with.
Yeah, we're not involved a lot in that. Except asking
anybody else ever ask you about that issue?
Oh yeah, and we ask. I think our involvement is asking every 3 or 4 months. Anything new on that?
Boy, it just sounds like it just sounds like if there's any progress, it sounds incredibly slow.
Yes.
Seems like 10 years ago I heard another 5 years, and here we are in 2024.
Yeah.
Anyway, what about bus service? Jim Levy, my friend. Sounds like Jim's one dogged guy, but has that been valuable? Have you got any feel for how valuable St. Albans getting, again, Greyhound bus service back?
I don't have any statistics about its usage, but I would say anecdotally I've heard people talking about it, and I think it's a great thing. Yeah,
no, I should. Obviously not taking the train to Montreal. I could, of course, go across the lake. I guess the Amtrak Adirondack that keeps kind of starting and stopping. I guess you're back to Montreal these days.
Yeah, well, you can. If you drive across the border, you could park and take the train in now, which is nice. Yeah.
Anyway, so some progress on some of those fronts.
I wish I could give you the magic answer on the train to Montreal, but I can't.
Yeah, no. I wasn't thinking you would be able to do that. Are there some, again, you're involved in so many things, are there some things over your 30 years that you're not doing that you used to do? Or is there some changes, or is it pretty much just adding new things?
It's pretty much just adding new things. I'm
Really?
trying to think of what we used to do that we don't anymore. I can't
Right.
think of anything. Yeah. Yeah.
And is this on your initiatives? How much of this is your initiatives? How much are some municipalities? Will they get you going on something they weren't doing, or the legislature, or combination?
I would say it's equal parts, all of those things.
Yeah.
So sometimes we recognize a need and we think, well, okay, what can we do to help? Sometimes we have stuff brought to us by municipalities.
Yeah.
And we say, of course, let's figure out how we can help you with this. Other times it's the legislature saying, like with this Act 250 bill, like, this is
Yeah.
what you're going to do.
Yeah.
So it's a real mix. I think what the initiatives we take at the regional level really reflect what we see working with our communities and what we hear.
Yeah.
So, for example, we just got, we applied for, on our own initiative, and got an $875,000 grant from EPA to do active transportation projects in
Yeah,
the
that was
region.
noted in the Vermont
Yeah,
Business
yeah.
Magazine story. Wow,
And-
that sounds like a pretty big grant to
It's
get.
a pretty big grant, yeah, and we're really
Wow.
excited about this project, and that was something we did at our own initiative, not because anybody asked us
Really?
to.
And tell
but-
us some more about that project.
Yeah, so this project is going to really fill a need that we've seen, which is we are going to be able to work with 6 or 7 communities in our region to do sidewalk and bike
Wow.
designs. So right now, to get funds to do sidewalks or bike paths, you have to go through the transportation agency, which comes with it a host of requirements passed
Wow.
on down from the federal level. I mean, this is not
Really?
Vermont's problem. This is passed down from the federal level.
Wow.
And so we're hoping that by using funds from a different federal agency,
Yeah.
we're going to be able to come up with designs for bike paths and sidewalks that municipalities can build themselves,
Wow.
that are easier, that are simpler, more streamlined process and timeline. And because it's a EPA, there's a focus on equity, so we're going to be working with those communities who traditionally haven't gotten
Huh.
the state and federal grants to build sidewalks and paths. We're going to be focusing on connections where people can use sidewalks and paths for transportation to get to important facilities. So
Huh.
we're really excited about that. So it will pay for engineering services for
Oh.
these projects. The other part of the grant is we're working with United Way.
Right.
So United Way will get a portion of the grant to augment their community giving that they already do,
Interesting.
to focus on active transportation projects. And
Yeah.
so it can be anything like, well, we've thrown out lots of different ideas, but imagine
Yeah.
a food shelf got a grant to buy, the walking grocery carts. So folks who come and use their services can have a cart to
Really?
carry their food back. Or maybe it's, provision of bikes to somebody who serves at-risk people, so now they have another way of getting to their job.
Huh.
So we're excited about what can happen with those grants.
Interesting. Big grant.
Yeah, we're really excited about it.
State government, and you're dealing with state government obviously a lot, and I guess federal government. Is that over your many years, has that gotten more difficult to deal with? Something tells me it's not easier, but has that changed a lot, that relationship, or?
I think what's changed over the years is that we actually work with more state agencies and more federal agencies, and we are seen more often as the place, like there's a need, who can do it? Let's call the Regional Planning Commission.
Yeah.
So like
Hmm.
when Hurricane Irene hit, regional planning commissions were called in to
Really?
help to backfill the State Emergency Operations Center, to do on-the-ground emergency work with our communities, and that led to a long-term role in emergency preparedness and emergency planning. So things like that have happened over the years where we're best positioned to really help serve the need that's facing the state. And things have gotten so complicated at the local level. What we're asked,
Sounds like it.
what is being asked of our municipalities
Yeah.
is really overwhelming. That has changed a lot in the 30 years
Is
that
that
I've been
right?
here, is the
Yeah.
expectations put on local government. And so I think that's another thing that's changed, and another reason why Regional Planning Commission services have grown so much is because each municipality can't take it on their own.
Yeah, and we've seen some local towns getting town administrators
So
in recent
many
years.
in recent years,
so
which is
some-
fantastic. It's
Yeah.
got to be a huge benefit for the elected officials
Well,
to
you
have
got-
that assistance.
You got to think so.
Yeah.
And that trend, no reason to think that trend's going to just continue, you would think?
No, I hope it continues. I hope even more of our municipalities are
Yeah.
able to find the funds in their budget to do
Yeah.
that, because it's overwhelming to think about what the local elected officials
Yeah.
manage in a volunteer basis, and it's hard to have the space to take advantage of these opportunities that keep
Yeah.
coming at you all the time if you're
Yeah.
busy managing just the day-to-day.
Yeah.
So the administrator or manager position gives you a little space for that.
Yeah. I suspect you don't, and maybe I'm wrong, nothing to do with school issues, probably the last thing you need to do, or am I wrong? You get into, have you got a good solution for, it sounds like, again, a real crisis in Vermont. I mean, good luck. I'm sure you're a way smarter person than me. Maybe you can tell us how the education funding
I
thing
had
works.
the answer. I wish I
And
had
it
the
just
answer
seems
for
like,
that.
to me, it's insane. If it's that complicated, nobody knows what's going on.
Yeah, and it's hard.
So an issue, you're not dealing with any.
We're not, no, we're not
I
involved
suspect you
in.
got plenty of other things to deal with. That's probably good for you that you're not jumping, although who knows, maybe you could figure something out. But anyway, so no school issues.
No, we're not involved in the school issues,
Yeah.
but it's a huge issue.
What are for your 23 member communities, the biggest needs, or a few things jump out more than other? I'm sure there's obviously a wide range here, but.
Well, we've talked about workforce and housing. I think those are
Yeah.
two. And then the third one you just brought up with the school issue. And I
Yeah.
think, a lot of our communities are really on the cusp of some generational change in leadership.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be interesting to see. I think there's a real concern that there aren't new volunteers to step up and serve in those roles. And so I've been thinking about what, if any, role the Regional Planning Commission can do to help to encourage and build this next generation of volunteers, because there's so
Yeah.
many people who are committed to
Yeah.
community that we need to find a way to funnel them into municipal and community service in that way. Yeah.
Vermont Council on Rural Development, of course, the new executive director, Denise Smith from St.
yeah.
Albans. And again, I don't know those folks well, but one of their staff members, Jenna Kolaski, I think,
Yeah.
who's now, I guess, moved on to join her former boss, Paul Costello. Anyway, but I'm impressed. I've interviewed Jenna a couple times with their Highgate Initiative. Is that an organization you work with at all? Or?
We do. We work very closely with the Vermont Council on Rural Development
Yeah.
when they're doing work in our
Yeah.
region. I served on the board, was the chair of the board with that
How
organization.
how many boards do you serve on, Catherine?
Right now, I think 4 or 5, but
Boy, do you get an occasional night? I'm sure you obviously get no day. Do you get an occasional night off, or not many, I
occasionally,
suspect?
yeah. But it's all good. It's fun.
Wow,
It's
that's
great
impressive.
organizations.
That sounds like a very good organization.
It
to
is a
me.
good organization, and we do work closely with them when they come to communities.
Because they've done Highgate,
did Highgate,
Fairfield,
Swanton, Montgomery,
Probably
and
more.
Franklin. So,
right.
yeah, they're working with Franklin now. And so we do work
Huh.
closely with them. We participate in the efforts. And an example of Highgate,
Yeah,
that's great how that has continued. And then in Franklin, we're about to work with them on their town plan. So the timing of their Vermont Council on Rural Development's community work and the town plan are
Yeah.
really great timing. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a good
Big-
organization.
Again, talk about Beta Technologies, big economic doing, certainly potential in the future at Franklin County State Airport for some significant. Are you involved in that at all?
We have been involved. We've been involved in helping with the.
Of course, Highgate got involved with passing a bond issue for.
Yeah, so we were involved at the beginning of the project to
Yeah.
help with the grant for the infrastructure
Yeah.
extension, and so that's where we became involved.
Interesting. What about north of the border? You get involved with any folks just neighboring towns north of the border? Sounds like it wouldn't be I'm sure you have other things to do, but it sounds like that wouldn't be a crazy thing to do.
It wouldn't be a crazy thing to do. It's something that we have done in the past
Yeah.
with the Missisquoi Bridge replacement. We worked very closely with our partners across the border on that project and in the public engagement around that project.
Great job. I dealt with that project big time, and I was just so happy to see finally some movement on there.
Yeah, it's great. But we actually don't work with them very much on a regular basis, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I wish we did more.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So being so close to the border, it sounds like that's not particularly affecting your work and stuff, just being a couple of border counties and.
Yeah, it doesn't affect it that much.
Yeah.
It affects our communities, but it doesn't really impact our work.
Yeah. You touched on water quality before. So Lake Champlain water quality issues, certainly with the flooding, just with all the sediment getting into the lake. How do you feel, again, it's a huge question. Do you think Lake Champlain water quality, is it basically holding its own? Of course, I get the reports from Lake Champlain Committee on the cyanobacteria and kayak quite a bit in Lake Champlain, but a couple of days ago. It was a pretty grim scene out there. It wasn't as bad yesterday, but any sense or progress on Lake Champlain water quality holding its own? Or I realize that's a huge question.
It's a huge question, but I will tell you
We're down
that.
to about 2.5 minutes.
Oh, yeah, okay. So holding its own, I think, would be the great way of describing it.
Yeah.
I think we haven't seen the improvements we'd hoped we'd see,
Yeah.
but what we
St. Albans Bay obviously comes right to mind.
right. But what we have to remember is how bad would it have been if we hadn't done everything we've been doing,
Good
right?
point.
Like it would have continued down the path of
Yeah.
getting worse and worse and worse.
That's a great point.
And so I think, we haven't turned the corner where we're getting to the, yay, look, it's really better, and you can
Yeah.
see it, and you know it is. But I think we've slowed the decline, we've stopped the decline, and now we're in a place where we can start to make some changes to make it better.
And I know the state pressing or basically mandating municipalities with wastewater plants to reduce phosphorus, although that hardly seems to be not a big part of the overall issue, but part of it, obviously.
It is part of it, and with our clean water service provider work
Yeah.
with giving grants for phosphorus reduction projects, we've got a bunch of projects in the pipeline that hopefully will come to fruition and make a difference.
Down to about 1.5 minutes.
All right.
Should have given you more time. Anything in another minute you want to touch on? You've covered a ton of ground here.
We have covered a ton of ground. I think I'll go back to the beginning if I can in
sure.
the last minute and just note that, we are a governmental organization that's overseen by our Board of Commissioners. And I would encourage folks to go to our website for Northwest Regional Planning Commission.
Yeah.
It's nrpcvt.com. And look at our board list and see if there's some vacancies in your town. And if you're interested, give us a holler or contact your local select board.
Yeah. And for any municipal officials who say, hey, I didn't know the regional planners were doing that, obviously give you guys a call.
Oh, yeah,
and
give us a call.
See what you do.
Yeah, and we're happy to help. And if we can't help you, we'll figure out who can.
Well, so staffing, you're pretty much where you want to be, or could you, I suspect you could always use.
You could always use more. We
But
could.
funding-wise, you're pretty much where, in a decent
Funding-wise,
place?
I think we're in a good, stable place, and we're able to continue our programs. Looking ahead the next couple of years, we're in a good place.
Yeah.
So it's always a good place to be.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Hey, on that note, we'll leave it there. Catherine Dimitruk, the Executive Director of Northwest Regional Planning Commission. But again, Catherine, I'm more 30 years. That's incredible. Sounds like you got plenty of time left, but that's a really impressive tenure.
Thanks.
And good luck with the future and with the Regional Planning Commission.
Thank you. It
All
was
right.
nice talking with you.
Thank you very much, and thanks to Josh Pryor, my key guy out there, our producer. I'm Richard Cowperthwait. We appreciate you watching us here on Northwest Access TV. See you next time.